Here is the after portion of Before and After for the original, the Amityville Horror. Upon rewatching it, this was the second time I watched it, and I studied it this weekend. Watched the audio commentary, all of the bonus features, all of that over and done with. The movie has some pacing issues, at least for me. It gets really draggy in some portions. And according to the guy on the audio commentary, he says very little of it is actually real. That doesn't really bother me. This is a form of entertainment. Now, it's strange that these murders, the DeFeo murders, have become a form of entertainment, but that's a very minimal part of this movie. We'll get more into that next week. But for the Amityville Horror, it's just the Lutzes, who are the family that move in after the DeFeo murders, and they have just random things are happening in their house that are unexplainable, that they get really nervous about. They're not quite sure exactly what to do with it. So anyways, I think there's some pacing issues with the piece. And don't get me wrong, because I absolutely love Margot Kidder. She was an amazing Lois Lane, probably the best there ever was. I don't like her in this. Really not at all, except for maybe one scene. She was able to scream like very few other people can when she wakes up in the middle of the night at 3:15. That's another thing. They make a big emphasis of things happen exactly at 3:15. They happen exactly at 3:15. All of these weird things start happening, but then they never really follow through with that, because wouldn't the logical thread be that at 3:15 is the moment that they leave at the end of the movie? I should have warned everybody that there's spoilers involved with this video. Upon first viewing, going way back when I first watched it, I had not read the book. I knew absolutely nothing about Amityville or any of the stories surrounding this. I was actually surprised that they made it out alive at the end, which is strange to say, because I think the majority of the audience who saw this at the time that it had come out knew that the Lutzes were alive because they were part of the publicity behind the piece, and I think the majority of the audience had read the book. It was this national bestseller. I had not. I hadn't done any research on it whatsoever, and apparently the book is fairly different from what we have here. But this is a video just discussing the film and my thoughts on the film. I really love James Brolin. I think he's an extraordinary actor, and I think he's amazing in this, just extraordinary. I think the movie lives and dies on his performance. Now, it was interesting because he has this scene after the lion statue bites him, which I've got to be honest, I didn't realize that was what they were implying until I saw James Brolin state that in the bonus features for the piece. It was too subtle for me to catch. Upon another rewatch during the audio commentary, I picked it up like that. But I did not pick it up the first time, so either I'm not paying close enough attention when I'm watching it, or that is a failure on the filmmaker's part. I think it's a cross between the two. It was too subtle for me in a movie that's really not all that subtle by that point in time in the picture, especially considering James Brolin's "I'm coming apart!" and he just goes insane with that line reading. I loved that line reading, but upon realizing what that's really referring to, and James Brolin saying he didn't like it, I rewatched the movie, and James Brolin was absolutely right. That's way too big, way too over the top of a moment for that. I mean, I know in the script it's saying he's yelling, but he could have yelled not so intensely. This performance is supposed to be fairly realistic. It's not supposed to be Jack Nicholson in The Shining. Now, granted, Jack Nicholson in The Shining had not come out yet when this came out. And James, I think, does a wonderful transition between the good, very charismatic man to this almost deranged, crazy man at the end, but we still, at the very end, we're rooting for him. I don't know too many actors that could have pulled that off as seamlessly as he did, aside from that one really over-the-top moment. The film's, apart from suffering from some pacing issues, and they never really followed through on their promise of the 3:15 aspect of it, and some things just don't make any sense at all, like blood seeping out of the house, and they're just saying, oh, it's a portal to hell, and I just thought it was oil, but apparently it's supposed to be slime that's coming out of the toilet. And why? There's just so many things that get set up, like James Brolin, George Lutz, that character. And yes, George Lutz is a real person, but he is a character in this piece. The fact that he starts to look more and more like DeFeo, the one who committed all of the murders, it's a really intriguing concept. Yet again, based off of the ending, it never really goes anywhere. I think that was my real initial thoughts of the Amityville Horror, was that I was surprised that it was deemed a classic. It just seems so strange because not too much actually happens in the movie. Which is a strange thing to say because I know that one of the guys who investigates it says it's not a haunted house thing. The movie, this is a haunted house movie. Let's be honest about that from the get-go. Not too much haunting actually happens in the piece. It's so frustrating. In a way, it felt like it couldn't decide what it wanted to be. Did it want it to be really over the top, like James Brolin's performance in that one moment? I don't think that's what they were going for. Or so subtle that really nothing happens. But it does get pretty over the top at the end with blood just pouring down the stairs and all of this. And Jody and the pig, that really goes nowhere either. I guess that's part of the point of the movie, is that you're supposed to believe in the unbelievable. That's basically the tagline of the piece. But every time I watch it, I do feel its length, but I can't say that I don't pick up new things, because the 3 times I've seen it, the very first time, the time I was doing for this video series and the audio commentary, I picked up on new things I hadn't picked up on before. And I was able to pay more attention because, in a way, it is a very subtle movie. There's very not subtle moments, and they become more and more frequent by the end, but it is very, very subtle movie, and there's little treats for you to pick up on, which maybe if you had been a book reader, which I was not, which is strange for me because I read every single pop culture phenomenon book today, essentially, aside from 50 Shades of Grey. I'm not going to touch that. I just had no interest in reading the book on this. I can't explain why. Okay, I guess to end this video, 2 questions. Am I excited for the sequel? Well, I really have to refer back to the very first time I saw this. And yeah, I had a really good time with it. All of the problems I've listed are still applicable, but it's a passable movie, so I'm very excited to rewatch Amityville 2, The Possession. And I'll talk more about my initial thoughts and also my thoughts upon rewatching it for the next week of Before and After for this franchise. And would I recommend the Amityville Horror? If you like this genre, and you have not seen this picture, I think it is worth a view. I'm not sure if it deserves the classic status that it has, but there's a lot of films that don't. There are plenty of worse films you can watch than the Amityville Horror, the 1979 original. I would say to lower your expectations, because when I lowered my expectations on the second viewing, I got more out of it. I had really high expectations because it's so known of a piece the first time that while I enjoyed it, I kind of walked out of it disappointed. But I was still intrigued by the sequel. So anyways, that's it for this week, guys. Next week, Amityville 2, The Possession.